watching the first home-owned station in Howard Lake. KRUD, Channel 3.
A rivalry can best be defined as one striving to exceed another in excellence. This documentary from Mr. C.A. Bush in the class of journalism deals with the rivalry between Howard Lake and Das Coqueto. In order to get some idea of what people living in the two towns thought of it, we interviewed coaches, principals, and cheerleaders, players, and students to try to present both sides. First, we'd like to show you what the two principals had to say about the rivalry. The first man you'll see is Mr. Carlson from Das Coqueto, and then Mr. Shevik from Howard Lake.
Howard Lake and DC rivalry.
As principal of the Dassel Coqueto High School for the past 2 years and at Coqueto for approximately 7 years, I feel that the rivalry between the two schools have been keen and very intense, but I think it's a good type of relationship. I see no particular hang-ups. I think it's keen rivalries between two neighboring communities are always, I think, a great thing to have, and therefore I'm kind of excited about these two communities as they play.
Would you ever do anything to change it if you could?
I don't particularly believe there should be any change. I think that both communities and both schools are striving to promote good relationships and feelings towards each other. And I think in one area which I'm very impressed with is the fact that our combination efforts in choir and band, where the two schools have performed in dual concerts and so forth. So I think this is one good step in a direction of a good relationship between the two schools.
What are your personal feelings about the Howard Lake and Dassel Coqueto rivalry?
Oh, I don't know. I don't really have too many feelings one way or another, I guess. I think a good, healthy rivalry is good. I don't particularly appreciate, of course, when the fans begin to boo each other, and very often some of the older fans setting a bad example for the younger people in the crowd. But I see nothing wrong with a good, healthy rivalry.
If it were in your power, would you change it in any way?
Well, it would never be in my power to change it, and I really don't think I would, except that I sometimes wish the fans were a little more calm, you know, and not raise Cain, for instance, when the opposition's shooting a free throw, or when the official perhaps makes a bad call, as in the case of basketball or football or any sport for that matter.
Do you believe that it's gone beyond sports?
No, I don't think it has gone beyond sports. I think, again, the game is played for students. And I think that, of course, there are going to be some emotional reactions to a game of this type, especially when the two teams, for instance, are fighting for a conference championship or for a district title. I don't make this an excuse that fans ought to boo and ought to carry on and chant things that would be degrading to the opposition. But I really don't think it's been really just that bad.
Then we talked to the two basketball coaches, Mr. Sideen from Dassel Coqueto and Mr. Trokel from Howard Lake.
Rivalry. I think as far as the students are concerned, it's, you need rivalries like this, because when we go over their way, anybody that's going to watch the ball game has to get there early, and vice versa. And from that standpoint, it's much better that way than playing before a lot of empty seats. I think occasionally some adults maybe get a little bit carried away, and there are some feelings that are a little deep there maybe, but that's to be expected too, and I think it's better that way than without the rivalry.
Okay. Are you aware of your team acting any differently before a Howard Lake game, and when do you think the guys play better in a game with a rival or just friends?
Unquestionably, there's a difference when we play. Well, generally when we play Howard Lake, there is quite a bit at stake in the conference standings, and so it isn't. We're generally playing for either the lead or something like this in the conference. So that in itself makes it of some significance. And secondly, just the fact that we're playing Howard Lake, being there is that rivalry, there's a different feeling. A week of practice, it's much more intense, and we like to beat Howard Lake. Howard Lake likes to beat us. That's what a rivalry is all about. And kind of forgot what the second part of your question was. What was that?
When do you think they play better, like in a game?
Oh, when I coached at Cokato, it was a problem for a coach to bring a team into our gym and play because the surroundings were very different. It was very compact. There was no place to go. There wasn't any room, and so it was difficult for other teams to come in and play their game in our gym. I think it's difficult for opposing teams to go in and play a good ball game in the Howard Lake gym because the surroundings there are quite different. For example, there are fans that sit up fairly high on both ends of the floor, and when the fellows are shooting, you've got the waving arms and that kind of congestion at the end of the baskets. Plus, on the free throw line, there are in the background people, and I don't know that we have any other gym in our conference that has that type of facility. So it is a little more difficult to go in there and play because the environment is that much different, I think.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Do you ever feel that the rivalry gets out of hand?
Yes, and I kind of in a roundabout way referred to this in the first question that was asked. I've coached against Howard Lake for, many years, maybe 10. And just occasionally have tempers flared in a ball game. I mean, it's been very seldom, and not enough to really be of significance as far as the athletes and the players are concerned. And I know this year we had one incident at Howard Lake, but basically, I think the players had a great deal of respect for each other, and I don't think there was any malice toward each other as far as the players were concerned. And certainly the coaches. I have the highest respect for Wally. And so what I'm saying is that the people that actually perform, on the floor, I think there's mutual admiration. I mean, I don't think there's that out of hand feeling. But I do sense the fact that from the fans, and again, I alluded to the adults. Now, there are some students from the student body that, get worked up in this kind of a thing. But if it does get out of hand, I don't think it's the players' fault. Again, I think they have the respect for each other, and I think it comes from an older element, maybe the alumni, maybe some of the adults in both communities. And I think if any blame is to be leveled or whatever, that's where it should fall.
No feelings about the rivalry between Howard Lake and Dassel Cokato.
I believe that the rivalry that we do have between the two schools is one of the better rivalries in the area. I think it's good for both schools in that the athletic contests that we have, regardless of what the sport may be, makes it a little more interesting for both the players and the fans. And as long as the rivalries don't get out of hand insofar as, say, poor sportsmanship entering the contest or anything like that, why, I think it's good.
Do you ever think that the fans or the grown-up fans or the student fans get out of hand?
I think they do. However, if people are going to get out of hand, it's probably just as well that it happens there where things are kind of under control. But sometimes, I think in the last few years anyway, we've had some incidents where poor sportsmanship has been shown on both parts. And there's been a lot of criticism that one school was to blame and not the other school. I think it's both schools probably were at fault, not just one or the other.
Are you aware of the team acting any differently before a Howard Lake DC game?
Yes, and of course that's part of the rivalry. A coach doesn't have to do too much as far as getting a team ready because they just automatically do this. Generally a rivalry, it's towns that are right next to each other, and the team that loses, of course, takes a lot of razzing onto the next time you play and you can beat them, and so you like to stay away from that. And so they try harder in practice, and they naturally try harder in the game. And so it makes it for an interesting contest all the way around.
Barry McKay from Dassel Cato gave Howard Lake a lot of trouble during the basketball season because he was one of their better players. We talked then to Mark Barth, a basketball player from Howard Lake, but first a face-to-face meeting with Barry McKay, known to some Howard Lake students as the Fairy.
It's okay.
Do you get more psyched up for a Howard Lake game than any other basketball games during the season?
You betcha. For a lot of good reasons that we don't get along too well. There's a lot of good kids over there, and when we're not playing, we're pretty good friends, I think. But I don't know, it's just been a rivalry through the year, you see, so it's just the way it goes.
Do you feel the rivalry between the two towns is healthy, and do you think a friendship would be better?
Well, to the standpoint of the fans and everything, I think it's a pretty good idea that there is a rivalry like that, you see. I suppose because the schools get a lot of money because people want to come and see the two towns play. And it's always a good game, no matter who has a better team or anything, I suppose. Like when Howard Lake had the state team a couple years ago, we played them in the, well, at Howard Lake it wasn't too good of a game, but at Cokato it was a pretty decent game because, you know, we wanted to do our best in front of our own fans, and so it was a pretty good game.
One more. Does your coach act any differently before a Howard Lake game, and are your practices tougher or anything like that?
No, not really. They're not too much tougher, but they usually say you don't want to get beat by Howard Lake, because it's I don't know, it's just through the fans again, you know, that just there's always going to be talk and stuff like that, so that's about all I can say about it.
Okay. Thanks.
Team. And Mark, when do you get more psyched up, for a Howard Lake game or for another game during the season?
Well, you mean for a DC game? Oh, well, I suppose I would get more fired up for a DC game just for the simple fact that they being so close to us, if they ever do beat us and when they do beat us, that it's a little harder to live down because they have a strange way of coming over to Howard Lake after they beat us to tell us that they did beat us and how great they are and all this good stuff, you know. So I would imagine it's a lot easier getting psyched up for a Dassel Cato game than it is for any other game.
Do you think that the rivalry between DC and Howard Lake is healthy? And do you think a friendship would be better?
Well, the rivalry, I think, between Howard Lake and DC is mainly between the crowds more than it is between the players. Sure, there's a certain bit of rivalry between the players, but I think the players are on a lot more friendship base than any of the fans are. And I think that in any athletic event, it's a lot easier to play the game if you dislike the opponent a little more than if you are good friends with him, because I don't know, but there's just not really, during a contest, there's no room for friendship. It's afterwards, sure, and before, yes, you can have friendship, but during the contest, you have to face the opponent almost as if he's your enemy.
Does Mr. Trokel act any differently before Howard Lake DC game?
Well, that's a kind of strange question. The only thing he really acts differently, he'll count each game as a big game, but he will, before a DC game, I've always noticed that since I've been here, that before each DC game, when we're down in the locker room, his last statement will be, he says, okay, I don't have to say anything because we all know who we're playing, and it's DC, and he says, I just hate to get beat by him. And that's the only, he doesn't usually say that before any other club besides DC.
Okay, thank you.
Now you hear what two cheerleaders have to say about our rivalry. First, Loretta Nicola from DC, and then Ida Mae Holtz from Howard Lake.
What do you think of the DC and Howard Lake fans when compared with those of other schools?
You mean at the games, like, and
Yeah,
stuff?
like how they act and that.
Oh, I think that the DC and the Howard Lake games are the most exciting, but that the fans get a little too carried away in that. Usually in the other towns, it's the kids that are in on the rival, but in Howard Lake, the parents are too, and that doesn't work real good. They're acting kind of.
Do you think that the kids really don't, like, they're really the bad sportsmen, or more the parents?
Well, I think what I've heard from teachers that go to church in Howard Lake, that just around sports time it just gets a little itchy because there's such a rivalry, but otherwise it's not, I don't know, it's just the two towns when the sports come around, when basketball season comes and when football and wrestling.
You mean the parents?
Yeah, otherwise they get along okay.
Do you receive better team support when playing Howard Lake?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, the schools always fill up when we play Howard Lake, and the kids always want to make signs for the hallway, and they want to have a good pep fest and everything.
Howard Lake Waverly fans compared with those of the DC fans during a game?
During a DC Howard Lake?
Yeah.
Well, I think our fans are more, I don't know, they're both pretty ready for the game. They both yell more than they do with other schools. And all in all, I think it's kind of neat.
What are your feelings about DC?
Well, they've been our rivalry for many years, and I like them about as much as everyone else, not very much.
Do you receive better, how do you think that the cheerleaders feel about the DC cheerleaders?
Well, we love them. No, we don't like them because we have problems and we cheer with them. Like, they take the floor first every time instead of like sharing like other schools.
We're talking about. We tried to find normal, average, everyday, opinionable students, but all we could come up with Donnie Anderson from DC and Phil Tisi from Howard Lake.
Wait, stop. You used to go to Howard Lake School, and do you think, which school did you like better?
Well, just looking from now, I liked Howard Lake a lot, but gee, I don't know. I really enjoyed Escoquito. That's, just speak from now, like when you had asked me that 4 years ago, and I would have said Howard Lake.
Yeah.
It's just that all my friends are here.
Okay. I can't do this. Do you think the rivalry has gone too far? And has it gone beyond just sports?
I think it's gone far enough. I mean, when sports, rivalry, yeah, it's great, but you come to like choir and band, when you get rivalry, yeah. When you have differences there. I mean, that's gone a little bit too far.
Like, what do you mean rivalry in choir?
I mean, oh, our choir is the best, you know, we're the best, you know, like that sort of thing, you know?
Who says that? Does archivist?
Everybody does it. We do it, and you do it. Both choirs do. And like band, everything's become a rivalry. Yeah. Rivalry, yeah.
This is funny. I can't. Oh, okay. What are your personal feelings about the HLW students and fans, and why do you feel this way?
HLW? Oh, Waverly, right, okay. I don't know. Judging by basketball games, pretty rowdy. Pretty rowdy. But I don't know.
Who, us?
Yeah. It's a lot of spirit, You got good spirit over there.
What about you, school?
Our school, we've got spirit. I don't know. You always get a bummer in every crowd. You know, somebody that's got a big mouth. It's just that Howard Lake has a few more.
Are there any like incidents that have happened, like that make you, the rivalry go farther?
Well, like, there's certain guys in Howard Lake that enjoy coming over, driving around our town, and just bugging people, you know?
Like how?
Ruining people's cars, purposely.
How, like? What do they do?
Oh, kicking indoors. You know, that's real fun.
How do you know it's Howard Lake people?
How do I know? I know them. You know, I've lived in Howard Lake. I know they're from Howard Lake. I'd say names now, but, you know, they might be watching me. we know, you know.
Yeah. Well, what do you do when you see this happen?
No, but I see what it's done, you know.
After it's done, you see it?
After it's done, right? And I've got friends that it happened to.
From Howard Lake.
No, from Cokato. But it's guys from Howard Lake.
How do you know? Have you seen them doing it?
Yeah! Okay, you see guys. What was that?
No. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I want to ask something else. Did you read the editorial Heidi Harnett wrote?
Yeah, I thought that was great. That was really fine. It's in the Howard Lake paper about Howard Lake fans, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Did you?
I agree with her wholeheartedly. I think the rivalry, you know, it's gone too far. I mean, when you go to games and you're afraid that you might get your teeth kicked in, you know. It may not happen, but you're afraid that it will happen, you know. Everybody knows that. Everybody's afraid.
Well, I think it's usually because the two teams are so fantastic. We have to admit that DC is pretty good, and so I think that there's so much competition that it's just a tough battle all the time, and we hate them.
What is Kazi's feelings?
They've got Barry McKay, and we can't get him.
Why Barry McKay and not the other players?
Have you ever seen Barry McKay's legs?
Changing the question.
Please.
If it were in your power, would you change the rivalry into a friendship?
No, that would spoil all the fun, because I think we look forward to calling them names at games and things, and burning our initials into their field, and I don't think we'd want to do that to anybody else but DC.
Do you think it's more the fans or the students that get more, you know?
What?
Oh.
What was that?
Do you think that the fans or students get more involved, you know? Like they call names and that?
Oh, definitely. They look forward to those games a lot more when they can call names and think up dirty things to say about the people and plan little things like writing their names on the side of their walls with spray paint and stuff. They really get into the games and when they can do that.
We found the rivalry used to be between Howard Lake and Cokato, but when Dassel united with Cokato to make one school, it just made Howard Lake want to beat them more. Now they were bigger in school population and had better chances of winning, being as they could put their best players together in a team. The rivalry started in sports, mainly basketball, and soon spread to wrestling, track, and almost all other school activities. Most people agree that the rivalry is a healthy one.
Here it is, kids, another program just for you. No, don't say thanks now. Just remember, KRUD when you go to bed at night. Thanks.
Oh, camera!
To many people, Christmas is a time of thanksgiving for material gifts already in possession. But today we would like to look a little bit differently on that idea. Why not rather be thankful for hostilities we do not have? With this theme in mind, we turn to a dramatization of a trial for accused murderers during the Second World War. The scene opens when a witness is describing to the judge the conditions of his so-called interrogation.
I was brought into the interrogation room of the political division together with some other prisoners.
Can you describe this room?
There were expensive rugs on the floor that had come off one of the transports from France. Bolger's desk was across from the door. He was sitting on the desk when I came in. The interpreter sat behind the desk.
Who else was present in this room?
The head of political division, Grabner, the accused Delusky, and Broad.
What did they say?
Bolger said, "We are the political division. We don't ask questions. We listen. You ought to know what you have to say."
Why had you been brought there?
I didn't know. I didn't know what I was supposed to say, and when I asked them to question me, I was beaten senseless. When I came to, I was lying in the hall. Bolger was standing there. He said, "Get up." But I couldn't get up. I pulled myself up against the wall. I saw I was bleeding. The floor and my clothes were covered with blood. My head was split open. My nose was broken. All that afternoon and most of the night, I had to stand there with my face against the wall. There were several others standing there, too. Anyone who turned had his head smashed against the wall. The next day, I was interrogated again. I was brought into the room together with several other prisoners.
What did they want to find out?
The whole time, I didn't know what they wanted to know. A couple of times, they put something around my head. Some kind of metal band, I think. Then I was taken back to the hall, and Bolger took the man next to me. His name was Walter Windmuller.
Do you know what happened to him?
He was in there for about 2 or 3 hours. I stood in the hallway with my face to the wall. When he came out, he had to stand with his face to the wall. He fell down several times. We had learned to talk together without moving our lips. I asked him what had happened. He said, "They smashed my balls in there." He died the same day.
Was Bolger responsible for this man's death?
I'm convinced that if Bolger didn't do the killing, he certainly helped to kill him.
Does the accused Bolger have anything to say?
Mr. Chairman, if I may be allowed to explain, that's not the way it happened.
How did it happen?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't kill anybody. I just carried out my interrogations.
What kind of interrogations were they?
Occasionally, they were intensive interrogations conducted according to standard operating procedures.
What was the reason for these procedures?
In the interest of camp security, it was essential to take vigorous measures against traitors and other harmful elements.
Accused Bolger, as a criminal investigator, didn't you know that a man subjected to such an interrogation will say anything you want him to say?
That's not the way I see it at all, and especially not in view of our primary task. If a prisoner proved stubborn force was the only way to make him confess.
When I was called into Bolger's room, I saw a plate full of herrings on his desk. Grabner asked me if I was hungry. I said no. But Grabner said, "I know how long it's been since you've eaten. Today you're going to see how nice I can be. I'm going to give you something to eat. Bolger's made a salad for you." He ordered me to eat. I couldn't because my hands were handcuffed behind my back. Then Bolger pushed my face in the plate. I had to eat the herrings. They were so salty that I threw up. I had to lick up the vomit together with the herrings. I still had some in my mouth, and Bolger shouted, "Watch him to make sure he doesn't spit any of it out in the hall." Then they took me up to Barrack 11 and up to the loft. My hands are tied behind me. I was hung from a pole by my hands. That was called pole hanging. They hung you up just high enough so the bottoms of your feet barely touched the floor. Bolger pushed me back and forth and kicked me in the stomach. There was a pail of water in front of me. Bolger asked me if I wanted a drink. He laughed and twisted me one way and then the other. When I lost consciousness, they threw water on me. My arms grew numb. My wrists almost snapped. Bolger questioned me, but my tongue was so swollen that I couldn't speak. Then Bolger said, "We still have another swing for you." I was taken back to the political division.
Were you subjected to a session on that swing, too?
Yes.
Then it was possible to survive it after all.
Survival is a mixed blessing. As we have seen, survival can mean pain. Here's another example of what is called survival.
I remember one morning in the spring of 1942, a platoon of prisoner police marched up in front of the barrack where the political division had been installed. At the head of the column were prisoners carrying 2 wooden supports built like the sides of a hurdle. Behind them were guards armed with submachine guns, and behind them, the heads of the political division. They had their briefcases and specially prepared dried-out bullwhips that they used for corporal punishment. Those supports were the frame for the new swing.
Was that the first time the apparatus was used?
It had existed before in a similar form. At first it was just a pipe laid across 2 tables, and the prisoner was strapped to the pipe. Since the pipe turned when the prisoner was beaten, this new frame was made to keep the pipe stable.
Would the witness tell us how he happens to know this?
Nothing happened in our part of the camp that we didn't know about. In the old camp, everything took place at close quarters. The whole camp couldn't have been more than 200 yards wide and 300 long. From any one of the 28 barracks, you could see the whole camp.
What was the reason for your being brought in for interrogation?
I was assigned to the work detail that put in the drainage ditch around the outside of the camp. On the job, I helped a fellow prisoner escape to get together with his mother, who was in the women's camp. The prisoner's name was Janiki. They took him into the interrogation room first. When they were done with him, they threw him out into the hall. He was still alive. He opened his mouth and stuck out his tongue as far as he could. He started to lick the floor, he was so thirsty. Bolger came up and turned his head with the toe of his boot. Then he said, "It's your turn now. If you don't tell us the truth, the same thing will happen to you." Then they strapped me up in the swing.
Would you describe this procedure?
First, the prisoner had to sit down on the floor and draw up his knees. His hands were tied in front and then pushed down over his knees. Then, they shoved the pipe in the space between the arms and the knees. Then, the pipe was raised and set into the wood frame.
Who took care of these preparations?
2 special duty prisoners.
And who else was in the room?
I saw Bolger there, and Broad, and Duliski. Bolger asked the questions, but I couldn't answer. I hung with my head down, and 2 special duty prisoners swung me back and forth.
What questions were you asked?
They asked me for more names.
Were you beaten during the questioning?
Bolger and Duliski took turns with the bullwhip.
Wasn't it the prisoners who were doing the beating?
I saw Bolger and Duliski with the whips in their hands.
Where did they beat you?
On the buttocks, back, legs, hands, feet, and the back of the head. But they concentrate on the sexual organs. They especially aimed for them. I lost consciousness 3 times and they poured water on me.
Accused Bolger, do you admit having mistreated this witness?
There's only one answer for that, a loud, indefinite no.
I still have the scars
Not
from it.
for me.
In the course of your interrogation, did you ever make use of the instrument here described?
There were times when I had to arrange for its use. The punishment was carried out by special duty prisoners under my supervision.
Do you regard the witness's testimony as untruthful?
The description leaves out a great deal and in many respects fails to conform to the truth.
What was the truth?
The moment the prisoner confessed, punishment was discontinued.
And if the prisoner did not confess?
He was beaten till he bled, that was it.
Was a doctor present?
I never saw an order requiring the presence of a doctor, nor was it necessary, because the instant blood flow, I stopped. The purpose of intensive interrogation was achieved when blood ran down their pants.
You felt you were fully justified in carrying out these intensive interrogations.
They were clearly in line with the duties and responsibilities of my command. What's more, it is my opinion that even now, corporal punishment, if administered by juvenile courts, for instance, would soon put a stop to a great deal of delinquent behavior.
It's been stated by the witness that no one could survive the swing. From all appearances, this claim could be somewhat exaggerated.
When they took me down from the swing, Bolger said, "Now we've got you in shape for a very pleasant heavenly ascension." I was taken to a cell in Barrack 11. I expected to be shot at any time. I don't know how many days I spent in there. The sores on my buttocks were festering, my testicles were blue and green and tremendously swollen. Most of the time I was unconscious. Then I was taken to the washroom with a number of other prisoners. We were told to strip and our numbers were written on our chests with indelible ink. I knew that this meant the death sentence. While we were standing there naked, the chief clerk came in and asked how many prisoners should be crossed out as executed. When he had left, we were recounted. There was one too many. I had learned always to be at the last in the line. Somebody kicked me and I got my clothes back. I was taken back to the cell to wait until the bunker was emptied again, but a prisoner orderly took me with him to the infirmary. Sometimes one of us did survive, and why I am one of the lucky few who did.
Being first sometimes can mean being last, as we have just seen. What's important is overall effect. But wasn't that said some 2,000 years ago? The investigation of inhuman treatment goes on. This time the procedure of killing by injection is detailed. The judge addresses one of the accused killers.
Accused Claire, how did you kill the prisoners?
As prescribed by orders with an injection of phenol into the heart.
Who else was there?
I don't remember.
The accused Sherpy and Hantel assisted in the killings by phenol. Yet their behavior was very different from Claire's. They were polite to us and said good morning when they came into the barrack, and when they left they said good afternoon. We often saw Claire wild with rage. Sherpy, on the other hand, was calm and courteous. He had a pleasant way of treating people. I never saw Sherpy beat or kick anybody. Patients who came to him often believed they were going to be treated for their illness.
As one of the prison doctors in the infirmary, what can the witness tell us about the early stages of phenol injection?
It was Camp Doc Entris who initiated the injections. He began by using gasoline, but that proved to be impractical since it took 3/4 of an hour for the patient to die. A quicker means was sought. The second to be used was hydrogen. After that came phenol.
Whom did you see administer these injections?
At first, Dr. Entris himself, then Sherpy and Hantel. Hantel did it infrequently. We thought of him as a decent person.
Did you see Claire kill?
I did not see it myself. Both Schwartz and Gebhard, the two prisoners had to hold a victim during the injection, told me about it. But we didn't waste much time discussing it. It was such an ordinary event.
The witness mentions different names in connection with these special duty prisoners. Were their names Whirl and Felix?
There were many special duty prisoners who had to do this job.
And didn't the prisoners do the killing?
In the beginning, they had to.
So the prisoners were killed by their own people.
We protest these tactics by which the defense seeks to blame prisoners for actions carried out under the threat of death.
The troops in the camp were subjected to the same threat.
In no instance has it been proved that anything was done to those who refused to take part in these killings.
That's easy to say now. In the eyes of the law, a subordinate can be held responsible only when he knows that the order of a superior involves the commission of civil or military crime. Our clients acted in good faith and according to the basic principle of unquestioning execution of their duty, with the oath of allegiance to the death, all submitted to the goals established by the existing administration, as did also the Department of Justice and the Army.
We repeat that anyone who recognized the criminal intent of an order had the choice of requesting transfer. We know why they did not have themselves transferred. At the front, their own lives would have been endangered, so they stayed where their enemies were defenseless.
The court calls as witness one of the former ranking camp doctors. In the course of your duties, did you have anything to do with the accused Claire, Sherpy, and Hantel?
I did not come into contact with these men.
Weren't you their superior?
Their only superior was the camp headquarters doctor. All I did was desk work.
What was your position in the medical profession before being called up for service in the camp?
I was a university professor.
And yet, with all your professional training, you had only office work to do?
Occasionally, I did some work in pathology.
You selected no prisoners for the accused Claire.
I refused to do so.
You were never present during selections?
Only to accompany the doctor.
Are you aware that those who took part in such actions were granted special rations?
I find it understandable and natural that for these hard work they had to do, the men should receive special rations of cigarettes and brandy. After all, it was wartime. Brandy and cigarettes were hard to come by, so of course the men were after them. They saved up their coupons and went on over there with their bottle.
You too?
Yes, everybody.
What was your attitude in regard to the selections?
We object to this question. The witness has already served his sentence and cannot be tried again.
I consider myself innocent, even today. The only patients chosen were those who couldn't have recovered anyway.
With your medical training, you saw no alternative.
Not with the way things were then. On the front, thousands of our own soldiers were bleeding to death, and people were suffering in their bombed-out cities.
But we are talking here of people who, though they had committed no crime, were held under arrest and murdered. You must have been aware of that.
There was nothing I could do about it. My first day there, the army doctor said to me, "We're in the asshole of the world here, and we have to behave accordingly."
Were you present when injections were given?
Yes, I had to go in there occasionally.
What did you see there?
Claire put out a doctor's coat and said to the girl, "You have heart trouble. You have to have an injection." Then he jabbed it in, and I ran out.
Was Claire alone?
Yes.
Wasn't the woman held down?
No.
The court is in possession of the diary you kept during your time in the camp. In this diary we read, "For lunch today, roast hare, a thick leg of mutton with potato dumplings and cabbage." It goes on to say 6 women injected by Claire.
I must have heard that somewhere.
We read further, bicycle trip, wonderful weather, then present at 11 executions, 3 women begged for their lives, fresh samples taken from liver, spleen, and pancreas, following injections of pilocarpine. What does that mean?
I had orders to perform autopsies. The purpose of this work was purely scientific. I had nothing to do with the killings.
The people whose flesh you took, had you picked them for autopsy while they were still alive?
We object and remind the prosecution once again the witness has already paid his penalty.
Why did you use human flesh for your research?
Because the guards ate the beef and the horse meat received for our use in bacteriological research.
Where was the phenol used for injections stored?
It was stored in the dispensary.
Where was the dispensary?
In the maintenance buildings outside the camp.
Who was in charge of the dispensary?
Dr. Caiaphas.
Who came for the phenol?
The requisition written up by Claire was handed over to Dr. Caiaphas in the dispensary by a messenger from the infirmary. The messenger was then given the phenol.
Accused Dr. Caiaphas, what do you have to say to this?
I don't know anything about such requisitions.
Did you know that people in the camp were killed by injections of phenol?
I heard about this for the first time just now.
Did you store phenol in your dispensary?
I never saw a great amount of it.
The phenol was stored in a yellow cupboard in the corner of the prescription room. Later on, there were also large amounts of it in the cellar.
How does a witness happen to know this?
I was assigned to duty in the dispensary. I saw the new requisition forms. They had been filled out and signed by Dr. Caiaphas. They called it purified phenol. But I'm not sure whether the words pro-injection were written on the forms too or not.
What quantities were requisitioned?
At first, small amounts. Later, from 4.5 to 11 pounds per month.
How is phenol generally used as a medication?
Mixed with glycerin, it is used for eardrops.
That's precisely what phenol in my keeping was used for.
4.5 to 11 pounds of phenol per month, 16 ounces per pound, each ounce containing hundreds of drops. You could have cured the ears of an entire army. Accused Caiaphas, do you still maintain that in your dispensary you never saw phenol for injection?
I never saw large quantities of phenol, nor knew that people were being killed with it.
Who received the phenol obtained from the dispensary?
The doctor on duty. He then passed it on to the orderly in the doctor's office.
You are watching KRUD, Channel 3 in Howard Lake. KRUD now leaves the air to return later with more enlightening programming for the students at Howard Lake. KRUD is operated out of room 162, Studio A, and is under the direct control of nobody in particular. Requests for particular programming should be made in person to someone who looks as if he is in authority. KRUD operates on a non-regular basis and is subject to the best wishes of anyone who can push buttons. Until next time, this is Announcer's Name, wishing each and everyone, watching or listening, a most enjoyable day.